Welcome to the Natural Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Christine Backus. I'm recording this on Monday, November 25th, 2024. And today, Mercury is stationing in the sky, meaning it appears to be standing still, getting ready to turn retrograde. So there might be a little bit of distraction, and I might be going off in about five different directions at one time. But I'm going to try to get through this because there are a couple of things I really want to talk about at the moment. And what I'm focusing on today is Pluto's move into Aquarius. I did a whole workshop on this last year, which is available on my Substack site. You can also, I think, still purchase it as a standalone in my shop on my website. I'll put links to those at the end. And just a little plug here, if you haven't already joined me on Substack, my page is called Co-Create with the Cosmos. And my purpose is really setting us up to work with the planetary forces as they go through some major shifts over the next year. And I'm posting regularly. I'm writing quite a bit. The podcast is available on Substack there as well. And I would love to have you subscribe, either free or paid. If you want to support the podcast, that's one way you can do it, is by subscribing on Substack. But in either case, that's where I'm putting a lot of my content these days. So I'd love to see you there. And you can comment and ask questions and participate as well. So that's the short commercial break. But what I want to talk about today are some specific aspects of Pluto's shift from Capricorn into Aquarius, and in particular, how it relates to what we are doing in astrology and with astrology and as astrologers or people who are following astrology and using it in your lives. Because, well, let's just get into it. So I've been seeing a couple of fairly what I consider disturbing trends lately. Some of this is because of the intensity of the US election. As you know, I'm in Montana in the United States. And so that's my primary world. But I know it's also been an issue around the world. I know that people have been watching what's going on for us in this election. And it's not just the election, I see it in other places too. But there's a tendency to forget that each one of us has our own biases when it comes to interpreting astrology and interpreting charts. And I'm no exception, right? I mean, I'm giving you my take on astrology, and it's informed by my experience. And I try hard to keep my biases out of it. But it's one reason, for instance, one reason that I didn't try to predict the outcome of the US election. First of all, because I felt like I had too much of an opinion on the people running and what I wanted to see happen. And it's pretty hard to take that opinion out of it. And the second is that I think that that's a potential misuse of astrology, is to try to predict those kinds of things. It's tempting, right? Because that's what we do as astrologers, is we look at the planetary forces and see and interpret how they're going to play out. But there's a danger in starting to get too concrete, and particularly when you're talking about individual human beings. And that's the other trend that I've seen. It's not just the prediction of an outcome of an event, right? That's still not personal. But one of the other things I've seen happen over the years, over several years, but it seems to be kind of out there now, a little bit more in force, is this idea that I can predict something bad happening to a person I do not like. And it seems that celebrities and high profile political are fair game for some astrologers. And again, to me, that's an abuse of power. We're still talking about human beings, and we're still talking about in astrology that combination, that sort of hard to pin down and elusive combination of fate and free will. If we start believing that astrology predicts fate, then that takes all of our agency away and all of our personal power away. And that's one of the things that I think we're going to see with Pluto moving into Aquarius is Pluto's job is to expose what's underneath, to expose what's kind of rotten and needs to be thrown on the compost pile, as some people put it. Pluto's job, Pluto excavates, it pulls things up that we don't particularly want to look at and shows them to us. And it's specifically around how we use our power. And one of the ways, whether you're a practicing astrologer or somebody, or just somebody who loves astrology and looks at your chart or listens to podcasts or whatever, when we find ourselves seeing astrology as a way to say, oh, this bad thing is going to happen to this person, or this bad thing is going to happen to me, that's either a way of taking that other person's agency away or giving away our own power, our own personal power, and our ability to be the authors of our own lives. Um, and yeah, so those are the two things that are coming to my mind right now in terms of what I'm seeing. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about this shift from Capricorn to Aquarius, and then talk again more about how what's likely to happen in the astrology community, and then how we personally can address this and use Pluto's presence in wherever Aquarius is in our chart, because it's a huge energy, it's a slow moving energy, and like all planetary forces, like all the energetic forces, we can choose to work with it consciously or not. So another kind of well, this is a personal rant, right? One of the things I've seen from astrologers is this relief about Pluto getting out of Capricorn. Capricorn's so heavy and gloomy and difficult, and it's been all about, this horrible political world. And this is one of those predictions, right, that I don't agree with, and I think has some real negative repercussions. Is now that Pluto's in Aquarius, all the good guys are going to win, and that the people that I think are the good guys are going to win. And that's not how Pluto works, right? Maybe at the end of 20 years, we'll see that eventually all the things that some of us are hoping for will have come to fruition, but it's not going to be necessarily this pretty rainbows and unicorns way of getting there, right? Just as it hasn't been with Pluto and Capricorn. And that is not the fault of Capricorn. Capricorn is probably one of the signs. Maybe that's not true. Maybe there are many of them, but Capricorn has this overlay of dominator culture, and it carries that dominator culture maybe as much or more than other signs, perhaps because it's ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is like the scapegoat for dominator culture, right? Saturn, Saturn's one of those planets that everybody fears, like Pluto, because we don't. My view of Saturn is that if you're not doing your Saturn, in other words, you're not taking full responsibility and authority over your own life, then you're projecting it outwards, and all the things associated with Saturn become difficult. Responsibility, maturity, contraction, all those things become things we don't like when we're not in integrity, that's a Saturn word, and taking responsibility for ourselves in our own lives. And Saturn rules both Capricorn and Aquarius in traditional astrology. And just as a side note, that's one of the issues I think that we're going to see become more obvious, and maybe more talked about, is whether Saturn or Uranus rules Aquarius. And we'll see kind of that tension between those two very different planets and those two very different ways of looking at how Aquarius works. And I'm not making one of them right or wrong. I like the traditional rulers, but there are lots of modern astrologers who use Uranus as a ruler of Aquarius who do very good work. So, and I'm certainly not going to argue with them. I just personally, I think that the traditional rulerships make more sense. And I've probably talked about that before. But back to what we're talking about with Capricorn. Capricorn institutions, financial institutions, banking, it rules, it has to do, it doesn't rule, it has to do with the material realm. It has to do with, it's an earth sign. And even though I think a lot of people have kind of when they think about Capricorn, they think of men. That's part of the cultural distortion because Capricorn is actually a feminine sign, which doesn't have to do with male or female, but has to do with the energy of the sign. It's a nocturnal. Another word you can use is yin or nocturnal. It's a more inward sign. It has to do with the material realm, what's tangible, how things happen in the tangible realm. It rules it's associated with institutions and things that become more concrete. And the last 15 years with Pluto there, we've seen institutions of all kinds start to break down because we're beginning to see, or really starting to see, the corruption, right? Again, Pluto exposes corruption. So banks and banking institutions and the financial system, that often is associated with Capricorn, and we've certainly seen that. Government institutions of all kinds, corporations and corporate institutions have also, we've seen a lot of corruption exposed there. And there's been that sort of move towards consolidation and centralization, and kind of the exposing the problems with that while Pluto's been at Capricorn. Just a couple of words about Capricorn's essence. Its essence is earth wisdom. It has to do with the wisdom that comes from being connected to 3D reality and to the earth itself. The shamanic astrology people call it the sign of the indigenous grandmother wisdom, because again, it's mastery of the earth realm. That's what Capricorn's about. And in our distortions in the culture, mastery of the earth realm has meant mastery of and control, right? It's mastery has morphed into the idea of control. And that's where the distortions around Capricorn have been. And that's why people that aren't sort of illuminating that and who have gotten stuck in that old, outdated dominator culture version of Capricorn are celebrating Pluto getting out of Capricorn. It's not like we're not jumping from the frying pan into the fire, right? We're just jumping from one form of flame and bringing up of shadows into another, because that's Pluto's essential job. Again, I have to go back to that. Yes, Pluto, I think all planets have have as their underlying purpose, if you will, to help us become more of ourselves. And in Pluto's case, it's to help us take on more of our personal, authentic, essential power, like who we really are, the power that comes from our presence and our being who we really are and acting from that place. And what we've seen in Capricorn is the distortion of power coming from money or coming from position or coming from this ability to control. And that's why it has looked so bleak in many ways. But again, that's not the essence of Capricorn. So Pluto is hopefully has helped us see what some of the corruption has been in the material realm. So now the energy shifts, the Plutonian energy shifts into Aquarius, and now we see different things coming up. but it's still that same energy of exposing what is corrupt, exposing what is distorted. And the distortions of Capricorn are very different than the distortions of Aquarius, although they both carry a Saturnian flavor. And again, they both have to do in large part with our perception and experience and expression of our authority. In Capricorn, it's the mastery and authority in the material realm. In Aquarius, it's the mastery and authority in the social thinking realm of ideas. So, whereas Capricorn is a cardinal, meaning initiating, sort of starting, creating, earth sign, again, material realm. Aquarius is a fixed, meaning consolidating, solidifying, air sign, and it's a masculine or yang sign. And Aquarius, one person described it the other day as sort of fixed thinking, which would be a very literal way of thinking about and interpreting Aquarius. Aquarius has the little squiggles, the double squiggles as its symbol. And my favorite description of that is those are the two snakes of wisdom. The waters that the water bearer carries with Aquarius are the waters of wisdom. So this is about thought and and it's also how we make sense of the world. It's also about the patterns that we create within society. One of the shadows of Aquarius is groupthink. And I think one of the things we're seeing, and I think that Pluto was really going to pull up for us, is, and I'll talk about, what we're already seeing in that realm, is how we relate to how we perceive the group is thinking. So there's a little bit of tribalism with Aquarius. I wouldn't necessarily call it the sign of tribalism, but there's like a potential of finding your tribe and the people that think like you and sticking there. And that's what we're seeing right now as Pluto moves into Aquarius with social media, right? We're seeing a splintering of social media. And it's not all new, but there is some very new pieces of it coming in right now. And for instance, we've all probably seen the distortions around Facebook and social media in general to some degree, more so as Pluto's been back and forth in Aquarius. We've all heard about the censorship and the suppression. We all are, if we are on any of these social media sites, you're very familiar with that. The fact that the algorithms, the programming behind the scenes has a lot to do with what you see and what you don't see and who you hear from and who you don't hear from. So that's not necessarily new, but it's going to be a bigger issue. And what we're seeing with social media right now is this sort of splintering and proliferation and decentralization, which is one of the potentials of Pluto in Aquarius. And for instance, what I'm thinking about is that there's a whole bunch of people leaving sites like Facebook and X, formerly Twitter, and going to a new site called Blue Sky. And they're people that think a particular way, right? Blue Sky was created for a particular reason, just as the current iteration of Twitter was created for a particular reason. And the people that run Twitter now, and Elon Musk certainly has been vocal about this as the new owner, have said this pretty clearly that maybe not in these words, that there is a backlash to the other social media because of the repression and suppression on those sites. And so the people that felt like they didn't have a voice on Facebook and Instagram have more of a voice on X. And I will say from my experience, they all have the capacity to be echo chambers. And this new one, Blue Sky, is no exception to that. It's as if what we're doing is splintering and decentralizing and creating our own little echo chambers where we can go hang with the people that we want and hear the stuff that we agree with. And while there's nothing wrong with that, one of our tasks with Pluto in Aquarius, and one of the shadows I think that will come to the fore with that, and again has already started in many ways, is that if we keep reinforcing one worldview and keep reinforcing our own way of seeing the world, we're going to continue to be shocked when the world does something different, right? And we've seen that in the elections to some degree in the US. But this whole decentralization and splintering of social media, I think, is one of the effects of Pluto moving into Aquarius, and one of the places where we will see that there's potential downsides to that, right? And that this is yeah, enough said about that. I talked about the reinforcing echo chambers and that we need to make a point of listening to each other. And Aquarius, right, in its conscious expression, in the expression that we have the potential to reach, is a quality of views, right? And the ability to listen to different points of view and to respect different points of view and to allow these different points of view to inform like a more expansive view of the world rather than allowing it to narrow us down. With Saturn as the traditional ruler of Aquarius, there is a potential for, again, rigidity of thinking in this case, and a necking down of our worldview, whereas the conscious expression of it is being so solid in our own personal authority and agency that we can be open to other views. When you feel completely at home and in integrity with yourself, it's much less triggering for somebody else to have a very different viewpoint and to be arguing with you. A lot of times, the shadow of this, right, is looking for other people to agree so that you feel more comfortable in your own viewpoints. And that's a way of giving away our authority. And again, that's, I think, what's part of what's happening with Aquarius. But the other thing I wanted to talk about specifically is that Aquarius is associated with astrology, right? Energy patterns. That's Aquarius has a lot to do with energy, and that realm, not the material realm, the non-material realm, but not so much the spiritual realm or it's not the realm of Pisces and the water signs that are more intuitive and feeling. Aquarius is that realm of thought and idea and energy. And I think one of the things that I think I said this in my Pluto class or a Pluto and Aquarius class is that we're already seeing a proliferation of energy medicine modalities. But I think as Pluto makes its way through Aquarius, we're going to see the whole medical system go through a fundamental shift because it's been so material for the last 100 years at least. That's how long conventional medicine has been kind of building and congealing in the US. And I think that's going to shift dramatically with Pluto moving into Aquarius. And that's one of those places where I have a bias. I hope so, because energy medicine, if you've tried any kind of energy medicine, you probably already know this, but whether it's homeopathy, which is a form of energy medicine, or some of the fancy techniques that are showing up right now, or Reiki, or whatever it is, there's tremendous potential there for healing and tremendous experience. There's more and more experience. But anyway, that's a little bit of a digression because what I really want to talk about is Pluto in Aquarius and astrology. And again, part of the reason for this is that I've been seeing this, I've been seeing people making predictions for public figures and how they're going to fail or collapse based on astrology. And it's one thing to take a look at somebody's chart and look back and see what happened on a particular date and what the planetary alignments were. And I've done this in a lot of my classes. It's fun to look at celebrity charts and, for instance, see that the initial public offering from Microsoft was was concurrent with Bill Gates' Saturn return. It's a fascinating expression of a Saturn return. But looking at a chart and saying, oh, this person's going to end up in jail, or this person's going to fail, or I've even seen well-known, well-respected astrologers say, oh, so-and-so is going to get really sick because of this alignment coming up in their chart. That's very different, and that is an abuse of power in my view. And I think that's one of the themes of a Pluto in Aquarius is we're going to see more of a proliferation of astrology, right? We're going to see a real expansion of astrology. It's happening now. You can get good, well-written articles about astrology in places that never had them before. You can also get very poorly written articles everywhere. You can get AI written articles everywhere. So again, discernment, 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 honing your intuition is one of the ways to really thrive over the next few years and in this transition to basically the new age that we're going into. That's critical. It's been critical for a while. It's going to be even more critical. And yeah, with the nodes moving into Virgo and Pisces, I think there's going to be more opportunity for that. But hone your intuition, hone your BS detector, because that's going to be what saves you in this world of AI generated things. And especially if you love astrology, learn to read with a critical eye. Hopefully, you're doing that with the news media already, no matter where you get your news, but need to do that with astrology and astrologers and pay attention to what resonates and what doesn't. Because I think it was Stephen Forrest, I'm not sure exactly which astrologer it was, who said that Pluto in Aquarius is going to weed out astrologers. I think there's some truth to that. But first, what we're going to see potentially, unfortunately, is, for instance, the weaponization of astrology. People who use astrology to predict and maybe do predictive programming of, again, public figures coming to ruin, bad things happening to people. We've seen it in private consultations, maybe forever. I think I've mentioned the story on the podcast before of a client coming to me saying that her father some family member had been to an astrologer a while back, and that astrologer had said that this person was going to die at a particular age. That's an abuse, right? Because I don't believe any astrologer can actually know that. And B, there's no, that takes somebody's agency and power away from them. And that's a very fatalistic, deterministic viewpoint of astrology. And again, I don't think it's fate or free will. I think that we have the opportunity to work consciously with the planets, and that's why I do what I do. So I think that's one of the things we'll see with Pluto and Aquarius is this potential, what I call weaponization of astrology, which, going back to the beginning of this talk, is that dominator culture overlay on everything. Until we see through and really learn to recognize that distortion of power, meaning control, and power being the ability to dominate and to like make things happen a certain way and to control the outcome of anything, then we're going to be subject to these distortions around astrology or even energy healing or energy work. There's already been, I don't know that it's mainstream, but there's been talk about energy weapons, right? Weapons that can direct energy. And there, if you go look up the Havana syndrome, I think that's one where there's been no conclusive answer, at least publicly, but where people felt like they were under some kind of energetic attack. Um, so again, everything can be used and misused, and astrology is no exception. So I think it's really important for us to, well, I mean, to me, it's one of the highest, greatest, I'm trying to find the right word. I think protecting my authority and protecting your autonomy and authority is that should be at the heart of how we practice astrology and everything else, right? Sovereignty and authority and autonomy for all of us is, again, the highest expression of Saturn. And what we don't want to start taking away with something as beautiful and complex and rich as astrology. Um, okay, so there's a couple of other, so just for making this more personal and talking about what you can do, one is really hang on to your agency. And that means pay attention to what your intuition is telling you, what's resonating with you, what's not. And then when you start thinking about just Pluto, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. And one of the things I typically don't do is say that, this area of your life is going to be transformed and upended and be chaotic for 20 years. Pluto is, if you have a lot of personal planets in Aquarius, then yeah, you're likely to have a lot of Plutonian lessons that feel very personal over the next 20 years. And that's true also if you have a lot of planets in any of the fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, what am I missing? Or Leo. All of those signs will be affected by Pluto and Aquarius because they're all in either opposition or 90-degree angles, and those are what get stirred up. But not necessarily 20 years of solid lessons. I just happened, for me, I had planets from 1 degree of Capricorn to 29 degrees of Capricorn. So there were periods, of course, where I didn't feel Pluto as directly, but I've had essentially 15 years of Plutonian shakeups. But remember too that every time Pluto comes into contact, yes, it can feel difficult while you're in it because Pluto has such an intensity, and most of us don't like power struggles, right? In our culture, again, because of our difficult relationship with our personal power and with power in general, that's what makes Pluto more difficult from a transit standpoint and why people are afraid of it. But what its purpose is to point you back to your own and show you the difference between what you have the agency to do and where you're trying to be in control. Control is an illusion. So really all Pluto's doing is showing us the illusion of thinking that we're in control. So in your chart, wherever Pluto and Aquarius are for the next 20 years, one of the key things is showing you what's your relationship with astrology, for instance. What's your relationship with the sort of the collective wisdom and collective thinking? If you're feeling out of step with what you think the collective thinks, what does that do for you? How do you feel about that? Pluto's going to show you. So your relationship with collective power, with society, and where are you holding yourself back? I'm looking at my notes. Where are you held back by what you believe society thinks? Those are some of the things coming up. Where are you giving your power away to astrology? Where are you giving your power away to a dogmatic view of science? Science is another one of those collective areas that is it's already being turned on its head in some ways, and we saw the beginning of that during the pandemic with the whole competing science, right? And the idea that there's one right way to think in the realm of science, just as we think there's one right way to think in the realm of astrology or whatever else. It's another example of what I've seen lately is I see people saying, oh, this form of astrology is the correct form of astrology. There are many different ways to do astrology. there are many different zodiacs, right? And there's not just the two, tropical versus sidereal. You have all kinds, there are people that believe there's a 13th sign. There's the draconic zodiac. There are several, there's more than one zodiac. And even when you get into Jyotish, the Vedic astrology, there are many, many different ways to divide up the sky and create the zodiac. So, and there's no one right way, right? That's one of the things that we're learning as we come into this age of Aquarius. And I think, again, this is my hope for the conscious expression of Pluto in Aquarius, is that we realize that we choose what works for us, but that's not going to work for somebody else. And when we're trying to impose our agenda on somebody else because we don't have enough comfort and trust in our own choice, which is generally what's happening, then that becomes a problem. And that's what we were seeing that. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully this has been clear. Again, I've got a whole class on Pluto and Aquarius if you want to dig a little bit deeper into that. It's available on my website. It's also now posted for paid subscribers on my Substack, and I'll put links to those. I know I'll be talking more about Pluto and Aquarius over the coming months and years. We'll be talking about the other major planetary alignments coming up. And in fact, before the end of this year, I will be doing at least one more podcast episode and specifically talking about astrology of 2025, because we do have some big shifts coming up. But until then, stay powerful and own your power and your views, and see if you can stay open to the people that don't agree with you, and maybe learn something from them. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being part of the podcast. And happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate it. Happy holidays of all kinds. Happy Sagittarius season for all of us.